premises in the National Assembly. This is a special sitting which comes in the midst of a recess which began some days ago. It is a broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. You can stream this particular broadcast on YouTube as well as watch it on Bunge TV and KBC Channel 1. There on your screen is the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Chiboy, ready to oversee business as the members will be debating the report by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee on the nomination of Twalib Barak as the incoming CEO of EACC. Good afternoon. My name is Edward Kabasa.
Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interests you've committed to our charge. Amen. I confirm that we have the required quorum, and therefore business will begin.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Members who are making their way in, kindly do it quickly because I have a communication to make. Now take seats nearest to where you are. You can rearrange yourself later. Order. Honorable members, the following communications relates to an invitation to launch of a strategic plan for the State Department for the development of arid and semi-arid for the period, semi-arid lands for the period 2018-2023. Honorable members, the State Department for the Development of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands, SDDA, was established via an Executive Order number 1 of June 2018. It's now revised. It is responsible for coordination of the planning and development policies and programs in arid and semi-arid areas, to reduce inequalities and vulnerabilities and ensure accelerated and sustained socio-economic development of ASAL areas. Honorable members, the State Department has developed a 5-year strategic plan for the period 2018-19, 2022-23 to be officially launched by the Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, EGH, Cabinet Secretary for Devolutions and ASALs. The launch will take place on Thursday, 20th December 2018, at the Kenya School of Government, Nairobi, from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. In this regards, the Cabinet Secretary requested the Speaker of the National Assembly to invite all honorable members of Parliament, particularly those from ASAL areas, to the lunch. Honorable members wishing to attend the function may confirm by registering with the Office of the Clerk of the National Assembly by 1 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, 19th December 2018. I thank you. Next order.
Order number 3, Messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements. Order number 8, motion. Ratification of bilateral air services agreements between Kenya and Jordan, Jamaica, Bahamas, and the protocol amending the air services agreement between Kenya and Turkey. Question to be put.
This particular one, as has been indicated, it was only for the question to be put. The matter had already been transacted. And I also can confirm that we have the required quorum for the question to be put. And I therefore put the question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing on ratification of bilateral air services agreement between Kenya and Jordan, Kenya and Jamaica, Kenya and Bahamas, and the protocol amending the air services agreement between Kenya and Turkey, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 5th December 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 8 of the Treaty Making Ratification Act 2012, approves the ratification of the bilateral air service agreement between the Republic of Kenya and the Kingdom of Jordan, the Republic of Kenya and Jamaica, and the Republic of Kenya and the Commonwealth of Bahamas, and protocol amending the air services agreement between the Republic of Kenya and the Republic of Turkey. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, special motion. Report on vetting of the nominee for appointment as Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Very well. I believe that will be moved by Honorable Cheptumo, the Chair of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Thank you,
whom
Mr.
I make
Speaker.
a request that he does it briefly, so that I can see there is quite a lot of interest from members who want to contribute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the special motion that, taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs in their report on the vetting of the nominee for appointment as Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 16, subsection 1 of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2012, and Sections 3 and 5 and 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approvals Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Major Retired Twalib Abdallah Mbarak as the Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Section 16, subsection 1 of the EACC Act of 2011, and Sections 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approvals Act of 2011, the chairman of the EACC on 30th November 2018 forwarded the name of Major Retired Twalib Abdallah Mbarak as a nominee for appointment to the position of Chief Executive Officer, Secretary of the Ethics and Corruption Commission, for approval by this House. Mr. Speaker, and in accordance with the provisions of Standing Orders 45-1, the Honorable Speaker on 4th of December 2018 conveyed to the House the message and committed the nominee to the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs for vetting. Mr. Speaker, sir, Article 118, Sub-Article 1B of the Constitution and Section 6, subsection 9 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Rules Act 2011 makes it mandatory, Mr. Speaker, for the National Assembly to facilitate public participation and involvement in the vetting process of the nominee. And in complying with this provision, Mr. Speaker, of the Constitution and the legal requirements, the Clerk of the National Assembly on 5th of December 2018, through advertisement in the daily newspapers, invited the public to submit memoranda by way of written statements on oath on the suitability of the nominee. Mr. Speaker, it is a requirement under Chapter 10 of the Constitution that we need to establish the status of the nominee with regard to his integrity, tax compliance, the status of the nominee with regard to criminal record, educational loan repayment, and the political party's affiliation. And Mr. Speaker, that is what made the clerk also, through a letter of 6th of December, to request for information from those institutions, that is EACC, KRA, DCI, HELP, Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. And Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House, and indeed the country, that the said agencies did not have any outstanding issues with the nominee. This is evidenced by the letters from the said agencies as Annexure 6 of the report. Mr. Speaker, the nominee having been notified of the date, venue, and time for the approval hearings as required under the law, Section 6, subsection 3 of the Public Appointments, Parliamentary Rules Act, and a Standing Order 45.3, the nominee appeared before the committee for approval hearings on 14th, 12th, that is December 2018. And Mr. Speaker, as we undertook the approval hearings, we dealt with 3 aspects as required by law. One, the procedure used to arrive at the nominee. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, is the constitutional or statutory requirements relating to the office in question. And thirdly, whether the nominee's abilities, experience, qualities met the requirements of the office to which the nominee was made. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the 3 fundamental requirements that form the basis of the vetting process for this nominee. Mr. Speaker, I will deal with the 3 items very briefly for members to appreciate the findings and the outcome of the vetting process. On the procedure used to arrive at the nominee, Mr. Speaker, the law is very clear. Section 16, subsection 1 and 2 of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act requires that the recruitment process of the CEO to the commission be undertaken, Mr. Speaker, 1, in an open, transparent, and competitive manner, and with the approval of this House, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, for a person to be qualified to be appointed to the CEO position of the commission, that person must be a Kenyan citizen, possesses a postgraduate degree from a university recognized in Kenya, has had at least 10 years experience at management level, and finally, Mr. Speaker, has experience in any of the following fields. And I'll just mention ethics and governance, law, public administration, leadership, economics, social studies, audit, accounting, and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, it is the business of the committee then to satisfy itself that the nominee indeed has or possesses those qualifications. In the position of the CEO, Mr. Speaker, was advertised through the dailies, newspapers of 9th of October. The total number, and Mr. Speaker, this is very important for members to understand, that the total number of applicants for the position was actually 71 applicants, of which 14, Mr. Speaker, was shortlisted. And this is in Annexure 6 of the report. The 14 shortlisted candidates, Mr. Speaker, were from different counties, They all appeared before the recruitment panel for interview. And Mr. Speaker, the panel is comprised of very prominent and respected Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We had a member like the chairman of EACC, all the commissioners of that commission were members of the selection panel, Mr. Kennedy Oketo, the Solicitor General, Stephen, that is the chair of Public Service Commission, and the chairperson of APSEA. So, Mr. Speaker, you realize that the membership of the recruitment panel is made up of very prominent Kenyans who are serious people who definitely had to take time to vet to interview this nominee. And Mr. Speaker, during the interview, retired Twalib Abdallah Mubarak from Kilifi County emerged the best candidate with the highest score of 86.38%, and therefore he became the best in the interview, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this particular issue, the committee was satisfied that the procedure, the process used to arrive at the nominee was transparent, open, competitive, and the nominee possesses the requisite qualifications and experience as required under Section 16, subsection 1 and 2 of the EACC Act. Mr. Speaker, the second item is constitutional and statutory requirements relating to the office in question. And Mr. Speaker, qualifications for appointment under the Act, that is the Ethics and the Corruption Commission Act of 2011. Upon examining, Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to summarize because the report is quite long, and my colleagues definitely have gotten time to really go through the report, so I will try to summarize so that members will have enough time to contribute to this very special motion, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to say that upon examining the nominee CVs, the certificates and the testimonials, and further, upon during the approval hearings, the committee was satisfied, Mr. Speaker, that a nominee met all requirements of Section 16(2) of the Act. Mr. Speaker, leadership and integrity also is a critical component because, Mr. Speaker, this is a nominee who is going to oversee EACC, which is primarily, Mr. Speaker, dealing with matters of ethics, matters of leadership, matters of integrity. And therefore, it was important and very important for us, a committee, to satisfy ourselves that this nominee indeed qualifies in this respect. Mr. Speaker, while determining the suitability of the nominee to be appointed, the law requires the committee to take into account the requirements of leadership and integrity under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the committee took into account the following areas. Article, and I will be brief on this, looked at the Article 73, subarticle 2, which provides for principles of leadership and integrity. Article 75, subarticle 1. Article 75, subarticle 3. Article 77, Article 78. Mr. Speaker, all these articles of the Constitution deals with matters of integrity. And it was the business of my committee chair and Mr. Speaker to satisfy itself that indeed the nominee qualifies in this respect. Mr. Speaker, upon a background check with the relevant government agencies, hearing from the nominee and examining ECV, certificates and testimonials, the committee was satisfied that the nominee passed the leadership and integrity test. Mr. Speaker, the fourth item is the nominee's suitability to be appointed to the office. Mr. Speaker, upon hearing the nominee and examining again his certificates, Mr. Speaker, the nominees possess the academic credentials, professional training, and experience made as the requirement of Section 16(2) of the EACC Act.
Order, members, please.
The nominee has not...
Order. Let's listen to the chair of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee in silence. I
Thank
know
you.
you have been off for some time, but the decibels are a bit too high. And in fact, there is a laughter I've just heard from one certain corner of the House, which is unparliamentary. But proceed anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee was also satisfied in this respect that a nominee is suitable to be appointed to the office. Mr. Speaker, when we invited the public to present their memoranda, if any, Mr. Speaker, there was no memoranda that was received from the public contesting the suitability of the nominee to be appointed to the office. However, Mr. Speaker, we received written memoranda in support, Mr. Speaker. And in the vetting process, Mr. Speaker, what is important is not the memoranda in support. We are looking at the memoranda that is contesting the suitability of the appointment. But, Mr. Speaker, it is important also for this House to note that Kenyans came forth and gave some positive memoranda in support of the nominee. That is from one George Sona, from senior lecturer, University of Nairobi, Association of Corporate and Industrial Security Management Professionals, Lieutenant Colonel Njukim Mwaniki, and many other Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. There are about 7 Kenyans who came forward to support the nomination of the nominee. Mr. Speaker, during the approval hearings, because it's also very important, Mr. Speaker, the committee took time to listen in the process of the interview, interviewing the nominee. And Mr. Speaker, we looked on the following areas: his academic qualifications, employment record, Mr. Speaker, his professional affiliation, his potential conflict of interest, all the requirements, Mr. Speaker, as set out in the Constitution. On his academic qualification, Mr. Speaker, and it is important for members, Mr. Speaker, to note this, because we are going to discuss the nomination of a very important nominee for a very important office, Mr. Speaker. This nominee holds a diploma in private investigation from Pennsylvania University, USA. Diploma in Armed Conflicts, University of Nairobi. Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science and Sociology, University of Nairobi. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Master's of Arts degree in Armed Conflict and Peace Studies, University of Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, it is important also for the House to know the work experience of this nominee. And briefly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform the House that the nominee has served in the public service, Mr. Speaker, for well over 34 years in various institutions, in various capacities, Mr. Speaker. He served in the Kenya Armed Forces and rose to the rank of a major when he retired, when he left that institution. He also worked in the National Security Intelligence Service, NSIS, as a senior analyst in tactical and strategic intelligence, Mr. Speaker, for 7 years. Mr. Speaker, these are new terms that I have come to learn during the interview of this nominee. There's something called, Mr. Speaker, he was a senior analyst in tactical and strategic intelligence. Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very important position, which military language, which I think is going to be very useful, even as if he gets a chance to serve in the EACC. He worked in the Anti-Corruption Commission again, Mr. Speaker, for 6 years, when he was able to set up the intelligence and undercover unit of the commission, which, Mr. Speaker, up to today, that particular unit now is helping the commission to fight corruption. He also worked in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, until his time when he came for the interview as a security and integrity manager. That is for 8 years. He is a member, Mr. Speaker, of the American Society for Industrial Security. He is a member of International Management Security Institute. He is an member of the Association of Corporate and Industrial Security Management Professionals. On his academic achievements, Mr. Speaker, and again, it is very important for my colleagues to understand some of these areas. Mr. Speaker, he spearheaded and implemented the corporate governance and integrity strategy plan for the Kenyan. Implementation and incorporation of government security organs in the national integrated security plan for Kenyan. Formation of a full-fledged intelligence production division with the information of undercover investigation unit, while in EACC and Mr. Speaker playing a key role in the team that transformed the National Security Intelligence Service. Mr. Speaker, another critical point I wanted to mention to the House as I almost conclude my this presentation, Mr. Speaker, is that we found the nominee, when he appeared before us, that he understood, Mr. Speaker, the role and the functions of EACC. He has a clear understanding of the functions of the Commission. He also understood the challenges that faces the Commission in fighting corruption, some of the areas which requires legislative intervention to strengthen the Commission in fighting corruption. He came up with some information regarding the need to have cordial working relationship between all the relevant agencies. Mr. Speaker, we have cases in this country where there is some aspect of perception, where there is a feeling that the DCI, the ODPP, and the EACC, Mr. Speaker, don't work together. And the nominee, Mr. Speaker, was so clear that he is going to ensure that he works very closely with those agencies so that they are able to put their efforts together as they fight corruption, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish also to confirm to the House that the nominee acknowledged that the job was a high-risk one, and the nominee submitted that he applied because he believed. Mr. Speaker, we asked him a question. Why did he have to apply again? Because he had worked in EACC for 7 years, no, for 4 years. Why did he have to go back again? And Mr. Speaker, he told the committee that he had enough skills now, competence to deliver if appointed. This is based on his first experience in military and intelligence services, during which he successfully undertook high-risk engagements. Mr. Speaker, I wish to confirm to the House again that we asked the nominee what strategy does he
I can't seem to get Honorable Cheptumo anywhere. I still want to give you some time, but you must summarize, Honorable Cheptumo, honestly, because you see, the interest is so much, and members want, you know, you have seen the nominee yourself. The members want to contribute to this.
Mr. Speaker, since I respect your authority, let me say that as I conclude, upon doing the background check with relevant agencies, Mr. Speaker, hearing the nominee, examining his credentials, the committee made the following observations, Mr. Speaker. 1, the nominee has academic credentials and professional trainings and experience met the requirements of Section 16, subsection 2. He is a Kenyan citizen, born in Kilifi. He possesses bachelor's degree as required. He has over 10 years experience at management level in companies, agencies, and or institutions he worked. He meets the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, having been cleared by DCI, KRA, ORPP, HELP, and EACC. He is not a member of a political party. He is not a member of parliament or a county assembly. Mr. Speaker, he is not undischarged bankrupt, and he has not been removed from office for contravening provision of the Constitution. There was no memoranda received from the public contesting his suitability. Mr. Speaker, he has never been charged in a criminal office in a court of law. He has never been dismissed from office under Article 75 of the Constitution, Article 77 on restriction of state officer. He demonstrated knowledge, understanding of the mandate and other pertinent issues relating to the Ethics and the Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, therefore, in view of this, the committee recommends that these pursuant to provisions of Section 16(1) of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission of 2011, the House approves the nomination of Major Retired Twalib Abdallah Barak for appointment as Secretary, Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission by the appointing authority. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the Office of the Speaker, the Office of the Clerk, and indeed my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, members of this committee, who took time, Mr. Speaker, to spend 3 days being here to vet the nominee. We treated to do the report, Mr. Speaker, for 2 days. I want to sincerely thank my colleagues for the commitment to avail themselves to deal with this very important matter, Mr. Speaker, and also to thank my colleagues for availing again themselves today, so that, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we will be able to go on record to be the institution that were able to vet the next CEO of Anti-Corruption Commission, which, Mr. Speaker, this House has pronounced itself that, Mr. Speaker, we should fight corruption by all means. And, Mr. Speaker, this country today, with the political will, with the enabling legislation, Mr. Speaker, and with the new CEO, there is no reason, Mr. Speaker, why, as a country, we cannot be able to fight this corruption and bring it to an end so that, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans can access resources for their benefit. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and allow me to request Honorable Dwale, Mr. Speaker, Majority Leader, to second this motion. And I want to thank you, members, and I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move.
Honorable Dwale, Honorable the Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion that seeks to approve the appointment of one Mr. Barak Swaleh as the next CEO of the as the next Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, this is the second CEO under the new Constitution. And I'm sure myself, Honorable Olago Olwoch, Honorable Cheptumo, Honorable Bande, and many others had an opportunity in the 10th Parliament to approve the outgoing CEO, Mr. Halake Wako. And Mr. Speaker, on the onset, I want to thank the committee, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and indeed the entire House that has come back from their busy holiday to come and do this national duty. And it shows that when the National Assembly members are called to duty, they comply, and I want to thank them. Speaker, EACC, or the Anti-Corruption Commission, has a long history in our country. In 1997, under the leadership of President Moi, is when the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, CASA, was established after the amendment of the Prevention of Corruption Act, Cap 65 of the laws of Kenya, then by the 7th Parliament. And that was before that Parliament was dissolved. Again, in April of 2003, during the term of the 9th Parliament, CASA was replaced by the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, KACC. But in 2011, under the new constitution, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and during the term of the 10th Parliament, the KACC was subsequently replaced by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, whose basis is found in Article 79 of the Constitution. And thereafter, in the same year of 29th August 2011, the same Parliament, the 11th Parliament, enacted the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act that gives effect and breathes life to the functioning of Article 79 of the Constitution by providing the statutory framework of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, at present today, we have EACC, a statutory body established under the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act of 2011 and pursuant to Article 79 of the Constitution. What is the mandate of this commission, Mr. Speaker? The mandate of this commission includes the law enforcement, the war against corruption, to combat and prevent corruption and economic crime in Kenya through law enforcement, through preventive measures, by doing public education, and through the promotion of standards and practices of integrity, of ethics. And, Mr. Speaker, furthermore, the mandate of the Commission on Ethics and Leadership is also derived from Chapter 6 of the Constitution on Leadership and Integrity Act number 19 of 2012 and the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act of 2003. Mr. Speaker, it is not news today when we as Kenyans are thought to be synonymous with corruption. There are people who feel that Kenya is synonymous with corruption. And it's reported that a section of our youth could not find jobs because of corruption. That a section of our youth could not even mind engaging in corruption other than hard work. So they feel there's an easy way of getting money. And that has, Mr. Speaker, led to the war on corruption by His Excellency the President and the entire leadership of our country. Speaker, the EACC duly submits quarterly reports to Parliament, an annual report at the end of each year. And this morning, Mr. Speaker, I tabled the EACC annual report of 2017-2018. But these reports, Mr. Speaker, are not discussed by the respective committees. And I really want to ask the chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to scrutinize both the quarterly and the annual reports of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the many other commissions that report to this House, so that we can analyze and create a performance-based appraisal on the men and women who work in these institutions. And I'm sure it's this book, this annual report, and the many others that are brought to this House that will give the scorecard on the men and women who work at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. So do we really accord them the priority they deserve, these reports, or they are taken to the shelves? And we must understand them, we must analyze them, we must call the CEO and the Commission to come and defend their report. So that again will also help us enrich the legislative discourse of this House. Honorable Speaker, I look forward to guidance from your Procedure and Rules Committee on how we ought to handle such reports. But in the meantime, I suggest we allocate specific time in allotted afternoons to debate the reports from the commissions. Mr. Speaker, the war on graft has seen distinguished individuals at the helm working for respective bodies mandated to do so. And allow me to mention quickly, there was the Honorable Harun Mau, there was the Honorable retired Justice Ringera, and there was the Honorable PLO Lumumba and the Honorable Momo Matemu and his two deputies, Mrs. Kaino and others over the time. And I remember in the 10th Parliament, when this House was debating the nominee of PLO Lumumba, he was praised by all. I think we were only 3 of us who opposed the nomination of PLO Lumumba. And I remember the Hansard will get me right. I said, it's not, the war against corruption cannot be based on how eloquent you are how you can choose good words, but barely 3 years later, in the same 11th Parliament, I was vindicated. The Honorable James Orengo and many others who were in praise of Piero Lumumba turned against him. So I am sure today we might be praising, I'm sure members will have a scorecard for Halake Wako. Halake Wako was passed around midnight, I remember, when most of us were very, very tired. And I'm sure people will praise Mbarak Twalib, but be very careful. Be very careful, because the Hansard is a living record. Because barely 2-3 months later, you might have a different version on the floor of the House. But based on the report of the committee, I think he has met all the criteria, and I hope he will not let down the people of Kenya. So, Speaker, I would like to bring to the attention of the House the content of this report, which I looked at it this afternoon, as I laid it on the table of the House today morning, entitled The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Annual Report for 2017-2018. And I also wish to mention the good work done by the outgoing CEO, Halake Wako, based on the report that was presented to Parliament this morning. Because in this report of 2017-2018 and 2018-2019, the Commission has handled over 6,000 reports, and out of which 2,800 reports were taken for investigation. About 46% of the cases presented were relevant to the Commission's mandate. 5,000, which is about 80.3%, were from the headquarters and regional offices. And the assets they are investigating in this report is worth over 43 billion shillings and investigation for the period 2017-2018. This is equivalent to the total payments to the counties of Kiambu, Kilifi, Mandera, and Turkana in the period reported. So 4 counties' resources have been taken to personal accounts, and that is what the AICC is investigating.
Now, Honorable Leader of Majority, are you seconding as the Leader of Majority or in your personal capacity as member for?
Number one, Mr. Speaker, I am a member of Parliament, at the same time the Leader of Majority.
Now, that's why I'm asking
the
you,
line
which
is
one
too
of
thin.
the two? Because there are consequences of order, Honorable Leader of Minority. I'm asking a question to the Leader of Majority, and he's the one to answer. Nobody else answers on his behalf. I've said, and I've asked him, are you speaking as a Leader of Majority, seconding as Leader of Majority, or seconding as a member of Garissa Township? That is a question which I want you to answer straight. It is a straightforward one, and then I'll make the decision.
Speaker, first
let me choose for you. Let me choose for you to make it easier. Let me choose for you so that it becomes easier. So let me tell you why. Because if you are speaking, if you are seconding as a member for Garissa, then you have 10 minutes, which is now over. If you are doing it as the Leader of Majority Party, you have 15 minutes and therefore a balance of 5 minutes. Choose one of them.
Of course, I am the Leader of Majority, and I'm speaking as the Leader of Majority. And so I'm sure there is
then you have 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
Parliament.
5 more minutes.
Plus the one that I lost.
5
so
more
I have
minutes.
10 minutes.
You didn't lose any.
So I have 10 minutes.
When I was asking you the question, you had just finished your 10 minutes. Now I've given you 5 minutes because you are the Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the various investigations, EAC has forwarded to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution a total of 183 cases as per this report. But, Mr. Speaker, why is this House recalled? It's because of a very important constitutional obligation. And now the story out there is the war on corruption. And the war on corruption can never be won if the institutions that fight corruption themselves are not corrupt. And in 2010 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans in their wisdom decided to appoint independent commissions and offices, only answerable to Parliament, to deal with matters corruption and ethics. And we're talking about the Office of the Auditor General, the Office of the Controller of Budget, the EACC, the DCI, the DPP, Mr. Speaker. So when the hunter himself becomes corrupt, then we are taking the country in circles. So Honorable Mbarak must clean EACC. The DPP must clean the office of the DPP. The Auditor General must clean his officers. And I'm told now that if the Auditor General's men and women are sent to audit the far-flung counties, they are told that there's an element of insecurity. There's Al-Shabaab. So they don't go. But the truth of the matter is, they have gone to bed with governors. Speaker, yes, it's good we are dealing with the Kenya pipeline, we are dealing with the Kenya Power, we are dealing with all government, national government institutions. But why are we not dealing with the many resources wasted in county governments? There's a lot of wasted. There's a lot of corruption going on in our county governments. In fact, in the view that we amend the Constitution, which before January, first I will give my opinion that because the presidential system of government is a winner take it all, then the solution to that, Mr. Speaker, is we adopt a parliamentary system with a ceremonial president and create a federal system of government in Kenya. We must have federalism in Kenya, like Ethiopia, where 80% of the national revenue goes to the Majimbo. And we remain only 20% with the national government. And the function of the national government remains with foreign affairs, defense, and the national treasury. That should be the route. If you want everybody to win, win-win, let us have 47. Yes, let us have 47 regional presidents so that the people of the north, their oil.
What is your point of order?
They are mining.
What is your point of order? Just a minute later, you still have time. What is your point of order? And by the way, honorable members, even as you upload, yes, but she's on a point of order.
I don't see how federalism is part of fighting corruption on that point of order. I thought we were discussing the approval of the nominee today.
Well, I actually do not see what is out of order in that. Honorable Leader of Majority, proceed.
Mr. Speaker, let me explain to Honorable Shamala. There is too much corruption at the center. And if we have to fight corruption, and if we want to make sure that each and every part of Kenya gets and eats the cake, then we should emulate what's happening in Ethiopia, where we will have 47 federal states with the federal governments. Yeah, we must speak. We must speak, because if we want to kill this presidential system of winner take it all, let us go federal system. Let's have a parliamentary system where the contest will be in the constituencies, where there will be no corruption. The presidential system of government is enticed and entangled with corruption, because the president wants to take money. There's corruption at IBC, there's corruption in the transmission of results. So I think this discussion must go ahead. And I agree. So, and you know, I am making this statement so that as we go to Christmas and New Year, we have something for discussion. Then January, if we agree on a referendum, the only referendum that I will support will be that of federalism. and a parliamentary system of government. Because after the leader of majority, the other job I'll look for is to become the federal regional president of Garissa State. That is what I want.
Okay.
Because how do we have many? With those many, Mr. Speaker, if you look at, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the Major Retired Twalib, I challenge him to guide the commission to sincerely partner with other players. He must have a working relationship with the office of the DPP, with the office of the DCI, with the office of the Inspector General of Police. There must be a good working relationship between him and the judiciary. The war on corruption cannot be won by annihilating the judiciary. The judiciary, under the leadership of Chief Justice Maraga, is critical. So all institutions, the leadership, Parliament, the Senate, must work together with the AICC. So Major Twalib must guide the commission toward that truth. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, Major Retired Twalib Mbarak has what it takes. He has an intelligence background. He has a security background. He has worked in the military. He has a discipline. And I don't think whether he will let down the people of Kenya. And he was nominated pursuant to Section 16.1 of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission of 2011 and Section 5.1 of the Parliamentary Appointment Approval Act. And for those remarks, Mr. Speaker, you know, as a leader, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, the story in town is that the presidential system is the winner takes it all.
No, don't go.
So let us take it everywhere,
now,
and I beg to support.
Now, okay, honorable members, before I move to the next step, let me recognize in the speakers gallery officers from the Parliament of Uganda, one Geoffrey Bainomogisha, who is the principal policy analyst, and two, David Ivan Masanjage, principal administrative officer. Very well, they should feel welcome in the National Assembly. Now, I see many members who have put interventions. I see Honorable Achali, Honorable Ahome, and Honorable Manzo Gitonga. Let me start with Honorable Manzo. What is it?
In accordance with the standing order number 97 for Mr. Speaker, could we limit the time to 5 minutes for each member who speaks now?
Okay. Yes. Yes, I'm hearing you. Don't be distracted, Honorable Manzo.
Yeah, it is already 10. If we could kindly reduce it. It is already 10 from the notice, Mr. Speaker. If we could kindly reduce it to 5 minutes per member.
Okay. I have no power to do that. It is the members to do the same. But is there anything different from Honorable Washali Jomo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Manzo picked my brains. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to add on what Honorable Manzo has said, that as a whip, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank these members to have come for these two sessions, both in the morning, which is the first time that we have sat on Tuesday morning, and also in the afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, myself as a whip and my colleague...
What is a point of order?
Yes, myself and my colleague Junaid and yourself and also the leaders, Mr. Speaker, they asked these members to come in for special sitting, Mr. Speaker. And they have sacrificed a lot to have come here in this session, Mr. Speaker. I think it is it's in order, Mr. Speaker, to give at least as many members as possible to make a decision on whether to approve or reject this nominee, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I want to agree with the Honorable Manzo that we reduce the time to Mr. Speaker, 5 minutes. 5 minutes is reasonable, Mr. Speaker.
Let me give you information that you may not have. Now, before I put the question, I want the members to be sufficiently informed. We have got a balance of 2 hours. We have a balance of 2 hours. There are 53 requests and 2 interventions. Now, that will be the decision you want to make. You said 5 minutes? Yes. Because the one I have is 5 minutes. Don't just put your hand up. If you have anything, let me Honorable Ntoimaga, what is it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recommend that we have 3 minutes instead of 5.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, we will actually proceed and make you make that decision. But that decision, because you've done it properly, under your standing order 43, no, not 43, 97. You have done it at the correct time before. So I want to put the question, and there are 2 questions here. There is the one for 5 minutes, and there is the one for 3 minutes. It will be easy for me. It will be easy for me. First, I will propose the question. Propose the question first, which is that taking into the consideration of the findings of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs in the report on the vetting of the nominee for appointment as Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 18th December 2018, and pursuant to provisions of Section 16(1) of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2012 and Section 3 and 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Major Retired Twalib Abdallah Mbarak as the Secretary and Chief Executive of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, that one is going to be, but let me now put the question on the different one. That will as many as of the members who wish to have the members speak for 5 minutes, say aye. Aye. Will as many as of a different opinion say nay? Nay. Now, so that I be sure that the ones who are saying nay have an issue with the 5 minutes, or they have an interest in 3 minutes. Now, will as many as of the opinion that members should contribute for 3 minutes say aye? Aye. As many as of a different opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it in the second one, and it is going to be 3 minutes. It's going to be 3 minutes, honorable members. And by the way, honorable members, it is reasonable. It is reasonable considering that we have a very limited time. So members will be speaking for 3 minutes. It is you who made the decision. Okay? So we will start with Murugara Kitonga.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Well, I honestly have not seen, is the leader of minority interested in speaking? Yes, and I will exercise a different, I will give you, honorable leader of my minority, and I'll also be considerate of your position. So 3 minutes, honorable.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My 3 minutes. Mr. Speaker, I do rise to support the special motion that this House approves the appointment of retired Major Twalib Abdallah Barak as the Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, I do sat in the committee that came up with this report. We deliberated over it for a long time, and I do agree with our findings that indeed Mr. Twalib is qualified to be the Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Speaker, we had our reservations because, in our view, the candidate was overly militarized, and we felt that, in fact, he may not have had any qualifications regarding matters anti-corruption. Possibly, we were driven by prejudices and other factors, including not always trusting what comes from the system, and especially because this commission has been headed by big names like Harun Mwau, Justice Aaron Ringera, PLO Lumumba, and others. However, upon concluding the interview, we were actually satisfied that Mr. Twalib is qualified to sit as the head of this commission. We actually took him to international levels where, again, he confirmed he has knowledge on these matters, and the assurance he gave to us as we summed up was that he is prepared for the task. The big fish must prepare themselves because this country is actually faced with endemic cases of corruption, and that we need a chief executive officer who is going to deal with this to the fullest. Our only request to him is that he has to cooperate with the other agencies, including the CID and the ODPP, so that everybody engaged in corruption in this country can actually face the music. I therefore support and urge the House to adopt the report. Thank you.
Now the leader of minority party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just allow me 30 seconds first to condemn the killings that took place in Kwanza constituency by police officers. Mr. Speaker, it is something that we didn't expect to happen in this era when we have tried to reform the police service. Mr. Speaker, I want to make my contribution to the proposal to approve the nomination of Tuali Abdallah Mbarak as the head of Secretariat of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. First, Mr. Speaker, while I support the appointment of this great Kenyan, I am a bit disappointed that the Commission did not follow strictly the requirement of Section 16 of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act, which provides that the Commission shall, through an open, transparent, and competitive recruitment process, and with the approval of the National Assembly, appoint the suitably qualified person. I say so because, Mr. Speaker, we expected the Commission to interview the people who are interested in this position publicly, so that Kenyans would be able to also verify for themselves that the person who is being recommended for appointment is qualified for the position. And, Mr. Speaker, this appointment is coming at a time that this country is engaged in a serious fight against corruption. And, Mr. Speaker, the reason why the President has engaged the office of the DCI is because there was a strong feeling that ESCC was not doing us justice as per the requirements of Article 252 of the Constitution. This is the body that has a direct mandate in law and in the Constitution to recommend to the Director of Public Prosecutions the prosecution of any acts of corruption, bribery, or economic crimes, or any violation of codes of ethics or other matters that are linked to corruption. But, Mr. Speaker, this body has been criticized previously. We expect a more renewed vigor as we get a new broom to head this institution. Mr. Speaker, we expect, as the Leader of Majority rightly put it, we expect, Mr. Speaker, that this fight is devolved, because we agree that you can hold to account the national government institutions. But, Mr. Speaker, a lot of resources is now being voted, especially development resources, is devolved to the counties. But, Mr. Speaker, the amount of money that we waste in counties is just too much through corruption. And it is something that worries many of us, that we don't see as many county officials being taken to court as it should be. And, Mr. Speaker, this is purely because a lot of officers who are given the responsibility to go and investigate corruption in the counties get involved and entangled in corruption. They get bribed and they look the other way instead of helping fight corruption. Mr. Speaker, something else that I wanted also to mention is that much as we hail and appreciate and we want to support fully this renewed fight against corruption, but I want to also say that we should not start celebrating too early. I say so because, Mr. Speaker, the office of DCI really needs to be very, very serious. A lot of these institutions, there is a lot of corruption, but some of the cases that we see being taken to court, in my view, look like cases where there is not enough evidence, enough evidence to lead to conviction. So, Mr. Speaker, I am wondering whether we are not being taken for a ride as a country. We are seeing high-profile cases being taken to court, but the willingness and the determination to prosecute them is lacking. When you hear that documents are missing, the documents that are supposed to be used to prosecute suspects, Mr. Speaker, it is evident that someone is trying to interfere with that evidence. But, Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that the institutions that we have, DCI, EACC, and DPP, are going to show serious commitment, not to wink the country that they are prosecuting high-profile cases, then we go to sleep, only to realize that those cases do not lead into conviction. We don't expect cases with weak witnesses, weak evidence being taken to court. We want to see clear cases of strong evidence being taken to courts which would lead to prosecution. And by the way, this is where I disagree with the president. When the president blames the judiciary, it is not the judiciary. It is the evidence that is presented to court. Mr. President must know that if weak cases are presented to court, the judges have no option. They will let these people free. So what we expect from DCI and EACC is proper investigations, and the DPP to institute clearly well-documented evidence to lead to conviction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to just pray that now that we have a new person, a person we are approving today, and this office, Mr. Speaker, has not been a very easy office. I know with the change in law, now the Secretariat is separated from the Commission. Initially, we used to have the head of the institution doing both secretarial and the Commission work. But, Mr. Speaker, I expect Mr. Twalim to really go into this office and make a difference. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with Honorable Duale that we need constitutional amendment in this. In fact, it was music to my ears when I heard the leader of majority today saying that he supports the referendum. But where I disagree with him is that you can have 47 presidents in this country. Mr. Speaker, you should agree with us that we need to have a more consolidated system where we have, say, 14 regions with presidents, so that if I'm a president of a region, then it is a real government. It's not these mini, small governments of 47 counties. It will not help us. But I'm happy that now we are becoming cohesive as a country, and an agreement that in 2019 we are going to have constitutional amendment, a referendum in this country, which is going to usher in a more accountable system of government, possibly parliamentary system with clear checks and balances. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I support.
Okay, very good. Let's have Garane Hire, member for Lagdera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to support the appointment of Mubarak Twalib as the Secretary and the CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Honorable Speaker, corruption is a very serious issue in this country. It's the reason why we have so much unemployment in this country. It is the reason why we have an ailing economy. It's the reason why we have a very dilapidated road network in this country. Mubarak has got a lot of experience in this field. He has been in the military, he has been in the NIS, and he has a massive experience to tackle this problem. Mubarak is a Muslim. The religion of Islam abhors corruption. It's strongly against taking of bribes, giving of bribes, or advocating for corruption. Mubarak is a man we believe can steer the leadership of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to the next level. So many Kenyans are desperate to see corruption is gone in this country. Corruption in this country has made us to lag behind in every other sector. Honorable Speaker, there is so much wastage and pilferage in this country due to corruption. There is lack of accountability for the people who are given the responsibility to steer offices. With those few remarks, I support the appointment of Mbarak Twalib Swaleh as the Secretary and CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Thank you very much.
Honorable Kamene Joyce, member for Machakos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to applaud the Departmental Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs. The panel that we have seen that has qualified and reputable persons. The nominee has an immense wealth of working experience in the different government institutions. The nominee managed to attain the clearance requirements by the panel. What is most fascinating is the great ideas and how to curb corruption menace. One of these, which I noticed, was his strategy of laying emphasis on the preventative measures. Truly, prevention is always better than cure. The root cause of corruption, the mindset, the mentality of get rich soon that has driven our country to the kind of state that we have must be fought. And that is why we want to support this nominee to make sure that head starts rolling and we can see actions, because we believe actions will always speak louder than words. And with this, I wish to support the nominee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Honorable Lago Luoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first, I'll spend a quarter of a minute to applaud the leader of my majority, St. Paul Duale, for his change of attitude, and two, to condemn what happened in Kolongolo in Kwanza constituency. Indeed, the MP for Kwanza, Honorable Ferrand Wanyonyi, who is here, would not be alive if he was not shot. He was present when all this was going on. Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege of sitting in this JLA committee with other distinguished members, and I support this report. When the nominee was asked, he gave a 12-point strategy for fighting corruption. One of them was that he would ensure continuous vetting of EACC staff. Mr. Speaker, my view is that he has got to carry out urgently but fairly a thorough audit of staff based on performance and integrity if the commission is to redeem its name. Two, he said he would strengthen asset tracing and recovery. Mr. Speaker, what I want to say about this is this. There's regulation that anchors asset tracing and recovery, but there's no legal regulation for what to do with the assets so recovered. What has happened in the recent past is assets recovered from New Jersey was sent back to the Treasury, and the Treasury used the same at their own discretion to buy ambulances. Mr. Speaker, that's not the right way to go. In my view, if we don't set up regulations that govern how assets recovered will be utilized, then we are setting the foundation for another very big scandal. Money is recovered, we go to the Treasury, and they are not budgeted for, and will just disappear there. In my view, like in other jurisdictions, we need to have regulations by this House on how assets recovered should be utilized. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I notice that there's a problem about the pace of proceedings and the tiff between His Excellency the President and the Chief Justice and the DPP is not healthy for this country. Any criminal trial lawyer here will tell you that many factors go into adjourning cases, and each case must be looked at its own merits, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's time that we don't condemn the judiciary wholesomely, but look at each case individually and find out if the decision of the courts were correct or wrong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Gilgil.
Oh my God. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to join in supporting this nomination. It is quite a timely one. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I was discussing with member Honorable Raso here, and we were saying maybe the committee would have even signed the report. It looked hurriedly done, and it does not even have signatures for the people who supported, so that we can be able to tell exactly who supported. But anyway, the credentials and the adherence to the law looks okay, Mr. Speaker. But I won't go to that because they interrogated it. I will go to what is actually expected to face Mbarak when and if he's appointed, Mr. Speaker. The cancer in EACC, Mr. Speaker, is not even outside. He must first of all deal with it from inside. I hope he has the courage, because this is one institution, Mr. Speaker, that we have even looked outside for divine intervention. We have even put an archbishop in it to be the chairman. So I hope that he will have the courage to actually interrogate from inside and root out what exactly makes EACC not move. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, even as we liaise with the DPP, the one major source of information and who is supposed to be the witness, number one, Mr. Speaker, should be EACC. And we must look at how we do our things and how EACC does its things, Mr. Speaker. Why do I say that? It's not just about raiding and carrying cameras to be seen you have raided an institution, or you have raided a house, or you have raided a member or a private member, Mr. Speaker. It's about getting the evidence, and I hope that this man, because he has done a lot in terms of private investigation, that he'll be an asset to be able to first of all gather enough evidence so that we can have watertight cases that can be prosecuted, Mr. Speaker, so that we can be able to talk convictions. Otherwise, it will just be a show, and we'll end up just gracing the newspapers, and that will be it, Mr. Speaker. In the other issue, Mr. Speaker, we have had a CEO, Halake Wako, the outgoing. We need to look at the output. How much has EACC, together with the Asset Recovery Organization, been able to recover? We are talking of billions of dollars today, Mr. Speaker, stashed in outside, in the safe havens in Jersey City and elsewhere outside this country, Mr. Speaker. We have even signed as a government the plan to repatriate this money, Mr. Speaker. He needs to know that we need to see the output if and when he's approved. I support.
Honorable members, and kindly, I urge you for patience in two areas. Number one, many of you will speak because we are doing 3 minutes. And then secondly is kindly keep around the house, because we will need to put the question, and if we don't do it at the right time, then it was pointless for us to be here. So let's go to Honorable Ososi Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I rise to support the motion on the appointment of Mr. Twalib Abdallah Barak as the Chief Executive Officer of the EACC. Mr. Speaker, EACC is a very important institution in the fight against corruption. But lately, we have observed that EACC operational framework is receding at an alarming rate. And in fact, DCI and Haji are doing a better job than EACC. So we hope with this appointment, we are going to see a lot of vigor, a lot of action by the EACC in the fight against corruption. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we want the new CEO to deal with cartels that have held EACC captive for a long time. And these cartels are there. And that is why we have had changes in the EACC all the time, because the cartels have been involved in ensuring that EACC is not functional. So we hope Mr. Twalib will help us in dealing with the inefficiencies at EACC. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the fight against corruption should not be sentimental, because we know in 2012, during the Grand Coalition government, the then Attorney General, Githu Muigai, wrote a letter to the World Bank requesting the World Bank to provide a list of the beneficiaries of the 72 billion shillings which are stuck in Swiss bank. But we are told that the list was given, but up to date, the government has not published those lists. We are saying if the government is serious about the fight against corruption, they should start by publishing the list of all individuals who are holding accounts in Swiss banks, the banks which are holding 72 billion shillings. Then we will know that indeed this government is serious with the fight against corruption. Otherwise, we support the report, but I think the committee should have done much better by telling us a lot more about what made this nominee to leave EACC in around 2004. It was important for this parliament to know the reasons why he left EACC.
Your time is over. Your time is over. So, Honorable Tuwei Kipkurui of Mosop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute. Major General Retired Twalib Abdallah Mbarak, as per the report, is an experienced officer who, according to him, is ready and determined to help us in wiping or reducing corruption in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, may I personally take this opportunity to thank the committee for having done a good job in vetting the said candidate. I have only 3 things to say. The major corruption we are seeing in this country is done at the center of power. That is the executive. One wonders what happens when one is being given a job, within a short time, forgets about the said job, and he goes engaging himself or